Have you ever made a decision that you thought was completely your own, only to later wonder, why did I do that? I know I have. I've made decisions in the past that I thought reflected clarity, but looking back, I realized I was working in patterns. I was rewarding the loudest voices, listening to the most confident, and not always the most thoughtful. And sometimes, without realizing it, I was choosing people who reminded me most of myself. We're living in a time where quick judgments are replacing careful thinking, and running quietly beneath those judgments is cognitive bias. Biases are like background apps in our brain, subtle, constant, always there. You think you're in control, but what if something else is really pulling the strings? Hello, my name's Annika Gupta, and today I'll be presenting my speech on the puppeteer's illusion, how cognitive biases continue to shape our everyday reality. I want to ask you this. Have you ever felt that sixth sense? Perhaps a gut instinct. It could tell you something along the lines of, he's always late. He must not care. Yet, that bias is the same assumption because it doesn't ask why he's late. Maybe he's juggling two jobs or taking care of his siblings before school. Because to understand takes vulnerability. So instead, we stick to what's familiar, towards people who look like us, act like us, think like us, because it feels safer, more comfortable. Yet in that comfort, we begin to exclude. That's why schools, systems, entire workplaces segregate, why cliques form, and why certain people are the same ones being left out over and over again. And the more I looked around, the more I noticed something. People weren't just making decisions based on evidence, but instead they were influenced by fear, stereotypes, social pressure, and even emotion. And the more I looked around, I realized that this was something in my life as well. I was helping organize a large open house, something with many moving. And suddenly, what happened was that one of my friends came up to me and she told me, I know this feels incredibly organized, yet I don't feel like I belong. I had backup plans for every single option. There was structure, control. So then I asked myself, why did she feel like she didn't belong? And then it hit me. My aversion to uncertainty is what made it that way. I was so focused on this structure, I forgot to ask for other people's opinions, their values, and their input, making something so rigid. And this isn't just personal, but rather it's human. Over 70% of individuals claim that they're often thinking about something other than what they're supposed to be immersed in. Now, this could be previous scenarios or future experiences. Either way, it makes it much harder to be present and active. So let me ask you this. If biases are such an issue, how do we solve for them? How do we make decisions that reflect clarity rather than distortion? In simpler terms, how do we solve for bias? Well, many people think that bias could equal training or rules. However, I would like to argue against that, because training could feel one-off or surface level, and rules can feel like box checking, leading to short-term compliance but no real comprehension. To truly understand the root of the problem, I think we first need to understand the cognitive biases that are really at play. And to do this, I like to think of it as an octopus with 8 invisible tentacles. These tentacles wrap around us in ways we barely notice. First, there's the IKEA effect. It's where we value our own creations because our time and effort was spent into it. Or the status quo bias. It's where we continue to have systems that no longer serve us prevail just because change feels uncertain. Or third, the confirmation bias. Our tendency to notice, interpret, and remember information that already supports our current opinions, shielding us from new perspectives. Or the comfort familiarity act. It's where we associate truth with familiarity, whether they have nothing to do with each other. Instead, this actually leads to more exclusionary practices. Next, the social validation effect. We tend to stick along with the group's decisions, suppressing our own personal disagreement to agree and conform with the group. There's also the authority bias. We tend to overvalue opinions of high authority simply because of their rank or influence that might come with it. There's also the halo effect, where one small quantity or opinion might think that they're good at everything. Now, this could be their looks, wits, or even eloquence. And lastly, the sunken cost fallacy. It's when we reinvest our time and perception into something that doesn't work very well. We double down, hoping to justify our previous expenses and efforts. Now, while all of these biases are incredibly important, some play a higher role than others because they involve power, perception, and pride. The IKEA effect, where we continue to look at our own perception. We value our pride because we spent our own time and effort thinking of it as elite. Now, this might seem harmless at first, but the deeper you look, you realize that we've created a culture where having your name on something matters more than the actual impacts it really brings. The more public the awards, recognition, the tighter this grip becomes. And the 2011 Norton study demonstrates this perfectly. Conducted by the Harvard Business Review, participants were asked to build either IKEA sets, Lego sets, or even fold paper origami. What they found was that individuals cited theirs as much higher values as compared to identical pre-assembled ones. This distorts our reality, and instead of accepting new alternatives, we stick to emotional attachment. Second, the authority bias. The Milgram experiment is a great demonstration of this. Individuals were asked to deliver electric shock by a position of authority to another individual when they were to answer wrong questions. Despite significant signs of distress, participants still delivered shocks simply because they were told to do so by a position of high authority. This shows how authority simply distorts our judgment, moral compass, and ethics. And lastly, the halo effect, where one small, minute detail makes us think someone's well-rounded in unrelated areas. We see this in media, business, and politics so incredibly often. Where someone's well-spoken or outgoing, they're seen as trustworthy in unrelated areas, not based on evidence. And Yale University conducted a study in 2013 that really amplifies this. Individuals noted that the same scientific research were trusted more when attributed to a more attractive researcher, showing that appearance alone can skew our perceived intelligence. This is because biases are forms of emotional cues and repeated exposure. Throughout time, they become implicit associations, automatic responses, especially when tied down to strong feelings, such as fear or discomfort. Because our brains are wired to prefer cognitive ease rather than analytical complexity. And that brings me to this. If biases are such an issue, how do we solve for them? First, try out cognitive debiasing routines. It's when we have structured mental checklists that allows us to go through the processes using the two-system think, breaking down our analytical thinking into multiple steps so we don't miss anything, making our actions more deliberate and reflective. Second, exposure to counter-stereotypic imaging. Exposure or visualizing yourself to people who break down these initial stereotypes, such as entrepreneurs or even disabled individuals. This could be like young politicians. This makes us, and it breaks down these implicit associations and eventually reshapes them. And lastly, perspective taking. It's when we continue to look at perspectives outside from our own viewpoint. It's something I've been trying to implement throughout my life, throughout the past couple of months. Through this, I use something called the compass code. First, I want you to notice when something happens. Are you holding on to a judgment simply because it's yours? Or does it actually reflect something? Next, evaluate where this decision comes from. Is it evidence-based or faced by external pressures, such as fear, social pressure, or even stereotypes? Then, Seek out perspectives that challenge your own, because growth doesn't happen in echo chambers. And West will be weigh out the actual impacts, the consequences, because the goal isn't to be right, but rather to get it right, even if that means personal compromise. And with those four cardinal directions, these reorient our thinking. And now I would like to return to my formula. I propose perspective taking plus cognitive debiasing plus exposure to diversity times empathy. Empathy is a multiplier. Without it, even small interventions fall flat. Cognitive debiasing helps us see and what associations and biases are really at play. Perspective taking helps us step into shoes different from our own, allowing for real questioning. And exposure to diversity allows for different viewpoints, breaking down initial stereotypes, reshaping implicit biases, and then building real data backed understanding. Throughout these, we can really learn how to reshape bias and maybe even hopefully eradicate it. Because bias loses its ground. Empathy and awareness, those are the scissors. And it's finally time we cut the strings to these puppets. Thank you.